Hey, this video is going to focus on attention, right? So what it is and how it functions. And attention is probably one of those concepts within psychology that you're already familiar with, as far as it's not something that's brand new or you're being introduced to. You already have an understanding of what attention is. And so the goal here is just to add more to that. All right, so we can understand more about maybe some of the mechanics of it and how it's functioning. So a couple of key kind of characteristics and principles of attention to be aware of is number one of the things that we're seeing is that we're always paying attention, right? Always. If you are awake, you are paying attention at all times, right? Now that doesn't necessarily mean you're paying attention to what's going on in that moment or what you should be focusing on, but you are paying attention. So even in those moments when you're daydreaming, right? When you're off in la la land and you catch yourself and you realize, oh my goodness, I've been staring at the wall for the past 2 minutes, right? Even in those moments, you are still paying attention, right? Oftentimes in situations like that, what we've done is that instead of focusing on something in our external environment, we shift our attention more inward, right? And we're kind of reflecting on something or exploring thoughts. And so still paying attention, just shifted it more to something going on more internally. And oftentimes when we do that, we're like looking up or off to the side and we're looking at things that maybe don't distract us as much so we can better focus on those internal thoughts. Okay. Outside of that, attention has 3 important characteristics. All right. Number one, it has a limited capacity. All right. So our brain is amazing. It can do a lot of things, but at the same time, it can only do so much, right? It has its limits, right? It has its capacity. And so our attention by default can only do so much, right? We have a lot of information coming in at us at any given moment. We cannot give equal focus and attention to all those different sources of stimuli. It's just not possible, right? So we have a very limited capacity. Now, one of the things that we're going to see is that with these 3 characteristics, they're going to kind of build into each other. All right. So because attention has a limited capacity, it also is what we call selective. Right. We can only focus usually on one major thing at a time. All right. So it's selective. Out of everything that's going on, we're going to selectively focus on what we think is most important in that moment. Right. And it's usually something that's relevant to us in the immediacy, or if we look at our long-term goals or anything like that, whatever is most important to us in that moment, that tends to be how we selectively focus our attention. Okay. So because it has a limited capacity, it has to be selective. And because it's selective, the final characteristic of attention that we see is that it can be blind, right? So as you are looking at something over here, we might miss something that's happening over there. Or what we can also see is that even though we might be looking directly at something, if we're not truly paying attention to it, even though we're looking at it and there's some kind of change involved, and there's been a lot of really interesting studies done on this, we still might miss it, right? This is something we call change blindness, right? So even if we're looking at something, if we're not actually paying attention to it, we might actually miss when changes occur, okay? So those are the 3 characteristics of attention. So just a couple of things to add to that. With attention, we often talk about multitasking as well, right? So multitasking is just doing 2 or more tasks at the same time or in very quick succession to each other, okay? So in order to properly understand this, we need to distinguish between the types of tasks that we have, right? So we have things that are more simple and automated, right? That don't require any thinking. These are things that we have just developed over time to know how to do just very quickly, right? So anything along those lines, anything that we do unconsciously, anything that's fast or automatic, anything that requires no effort or thought on our part, we can do multiple things of those at the same time. Very, very easy, okay? Not a problem. At the same time, we have tasks that require more attention, right? These are requiring deliberate and intentional focus. And when it comes to this, either because it's more complex or something that's new, whatever it is, because it's requiring so much attention, we can do one and one thing only. That's it, right? If it ever feels like or ever seems like someone is doing multiple complex tasks at the same time, they are not, right? All they are doing is rapidly switching between one and the other, okay? And that is not going to work out well for us. We have what's called a switching cost. This is a cognitive penalty that we face. So when we attempt to do multiple complex things at the same time, what we're going to find is that one, we're slower, right? It actually takes us longer to complete all the tasks that we're trying to do quickly. And two, we're more likely to make errors, right? We're more likely to get things wrong. Okay? So things that we can learn from this is that we want to focus on one thing at a time and give it our full attention, complete it, and then kind of move on to the next, right? And what those tasks are can vary, right? So for example, if you have been driving for a number of years, you may have experienced a situation where you're driving somewhere to home, to school, to work, wherever it is. You arrive at your destination, and then you realize, I have no idea how I got here. Like the past 5 minutes are complete blank, and you were just kind of on autopilot, right? At that point, driving has become an automatic task for you, even though in the beginning it was something more controlled and more complex that required more attention. Okay? So we've gotten to the point where it's an automatic task. Can it ever go back to being more a complex or controlled processing type thing? Yes, it can. All right, so imagine you're driving around, you have your friends in the car with you, you listen to music, they start cranking it up really loud, and everybody's singing and having a good time. And then out of nowhere, a torrential downpour happens, right? This huge thunderstorm appears out of nowhere. Okay? How many of us in that moment, maybe without even realizing it, are going to reach up and turn the volume down on the music? Because we need to focus more, right? We've changed the dynamics. So something that we were doing fairly automatically before now requires more attention. It's something that's more complex, right? So these are just a few things for us to be aware of. What I would encourage you to do is thinking about, if we know that true multitasking of two or more complex tasks at the same time is impossible, what applications can we see for that in real life outside of something like maybe driving? Okay, so when we look at our cell phones that we always seem to have with us, that we're always looking at, how might that impact us if we're focused on that while trying to watch a movie? If we're focused on that while driving? If we're focused on that while sitting in class, right? A lot of us think that we can do whatever it is, play the game or look something up on our phone and still be paying attention to what's going on. That's not the case, right? And like we said, if we try to switch back and forth very quickly, there's that cognitive penalty, that switching cost, all right? We're going to be more prone to error and things take longer. And in the case of like maybe in the classroom, we're not learning as much as maybe we think we are, right? So a few things for us to consider there.